Hello and welcome to the Sensibly Speaking podcast. This is Chris Shelton, the critical thinker at large, coming at you for another show here in the third week of February 2019.
Sure.
And this episode is called The Psychology of Doubling Down.
Excellently said.
Thank you. And as you all can see, I've got my great friend Rachel Bernstein on, psychologist, family therapist extraordinaire, and also cult recovery expert, who I've spoken with many times. Rachel, thanks for being on the show here.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Awesome. Okay, let me open this with actually just a little bit of ripping off somebody else here. I'm gonna quote from an article called "The Psychology of Doubling Down," which was in a magazine from a couple years ago. I will have a link to it below. It says, in gambling, doubling down, this term, doubling down, what does it mean, right? In gambling, it's a term used for calculated risk, one that typically indicates you have enormous confidence in winning. In real life, the confidence applies to the conviction that you're somehow above the fray of facts and also possess just enough stubbornness required to die on that hill. It requires a steadfast refusal to admit there's any possibility that you're wrong, followed by wild scrambling to save face. In other contexts, people use the term to simply mean make more effort or do more, as in double down to help Haiti or double down on women's issues. There's also, it's worth noting, a KFC double down sandwich. The bread is replaced by 2 pieces of fried chicken. But most of us nowadays use double down to indicate stubbornly clinging to a notion in the face of evidence to the contrary. You've seen or heard of maybe some of this before in your practice?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I have. It's a great phrase because it's so much of what happens psychologically, where people, double down is just such a nice way of saying, like, digging your heels in.
Yes.
It's the same kind of force down. Like, I'm going to get stuck here, even if I'm in the mud, right? I'm not on a path that actually makes sense. I'm going to stick my feet here just because. And it's the just because part that's maddening, because if you feel like you actually have a point that's salient, that would be helpful, and the other person isn't necessarily open to it, the idea of being able to change someone's mind, a lot of time, is not about you necessarily having better information or being right or more accurate. It's about the other person being open to having their mind changed. Right?
Very good point. Yes.
Right. So it's a good way to kind of frame it, that if people will just try everything. Well, they'll come up with this study and that study, whatever. But the person already has, they're like, la, 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 right? They've decided, and so then you just get louder, or you think that you just have to be cleverer, or just, really kind of get an approach across to them in a way that's finally going to work. But I see this with people who are involved with people they shouldn't be involved with, and they're not yet ready to see that. And they're not yet ready to take in that they made a mistake. People who get involved in cultic groups, you can see that they have these thought-stopping techniques, and I think a lot of the doubling down are thought-stopping techniques.
Yep.
Where they have come up with the phrases in their head that justify their position, and that they get something from holding on to that position. It makes them feel secure. It makes them still feel aligned to the other people they want to be aligned to, who feel the same way. But I think it also comes from the need to be right, or at least not yet feeling courageous enough to be wrong.
Yes, I think that's a very good point. And courage is definitely the right word. It really does require some gumption to be able to confess that you had a position and now it's a different one. Isn't it kind of, what is that? Where does that come from?
Well, just to also add to that, it's especially hard to find the courage when someone has been attacking you, because then you have dug your heels in. Then you don't want to kind of give them that because you feel like they don't deserve it because they've been mean.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, there's a little bit of a reciprocity,
equality,
tit for tat thing that enters in. Yeah.
Right. So if you've been nasty and you're like, how come you don't see my point? Sometimes people will say in their minds, oh, I saw your point like 5 hours ago. But because you were so nasty, I was not going to admit it. Right.
Yeah.
So there is something to be learned about how to approach these conversations to give someone the ability, to give someone the space, to give someone the feeling of safety, and also that to be able to say, oh, I see your point, but also that you haven't been so awful that they don't want to offer you that, because it does take a certain kind of generous spirit and overlooking a lot of bad behavior sometimes in order to do that. But I think that there is some pride in it and some saving face and feeling confident and being able to stand up for ourselves and practicing that. And it feels good and it feels strong. And sometimes it's in the action of doing it that matters more than the content of what we're saying. And that's when you know someone's argument is breaking down, but they're not yet willing to see it because they just feel very empowered by being able to kind of stand up for their position. So there are a lot of psychological needs that are getting met, that are at play, that again are not necessarily about what's the truth and what's not and what's right and what's wrong. There are just so many other forces and so many other things that people want to be able to feel in that moment that take precedence.
I think the emotional points there are very real to me. I mean, I have been like the worst at this on social media. I have done all the mistakes. I have cussed people out. I have been vicious. I've been mean. I have been very, very things I am definitely not proud of. Tried to learn from that. Don't kill me quite yet. But I think you're really on to something there with that emotional component. Now, do you think that it's better to or easier or more effective? Maybe I'm not sure. I'm sort of thinking as I'm going here, but somebody comes at like, okay, let's talk about social media, for example. But I guess this could happen in real life too. Actually, let's say you're having an argument or discussion. It gets heated. You really start going after the guy hard, right? Mm-hmm. Is it like it? And then you get them to that place where their argument's totally broken down. They're wrong. It's just all falling apart. Is it better there to try to then, to be that aggressive and then patch it up afterwards, or maybe just not get that way in the first place?
Yeah.
And can you get somebody past the emotional arguments and past all the other stuff without overwhelming them and their emotions? I guess I'm asking.
It's hard. I mean, sometimes you can feel like, the damage has already been done and now it's a futile attempt to actually get to really the validity of an argument, that you're just dealing with kind of a mess that you've created or a mess that you've endured. And that's the thing that was suddenly more important. It's like people who will scream something at someone else, and usually the other person just hears the volume. They don't really even hear the words. They just kind of get scared and intimidated, and then they deal with all those feelings. And they can't even respond to what's being said or what's being screamed. But I do think that there is something about this impetus to feel that you have to respond and that you also don't want to be a doormat. So sometimes people feel triggered to respond in kind, to show that they can't be mistreated. And again, I think once you feel like you've been baited in that way, you want to take notice of it and go, okay, why is my heart suddenly racing? Why did it go from talking about politics to me just suddenly hating that person? Like, what just happened, you know?
Right. This exact moment. I think this is a very important moment in these kind of quote unquote conversations, or, you know, what could become, or what could be conversations, but becomes something else and something kind of worse.
Right. They become something else, and then it's its own distraction. And then it kind of brings out your worst behavior, right? Because you do feel like someone just threw a punch, so you need to punch back. But also when you're on social media, because you are emboldened by the facelessness of it, then you can punch back and keep punching. And you can also make it personal. It gets personal. You know, they'll go from talking about Trump to suddenly talking about your mother. You're like, okay,
right.
This just went south really fast. And so to extricate yourself from it, because it's a waste of energy, it's a waste of time. You also, you took the bait, basically. And is that person worth ruining your day? And are you even getting your message across, which really should be what's at the root of you even bothering? And if not, then you say, you know, this is no longer a conversation. This is just you like sort of lobbing things at my head and I have to duck or try to lob them back. That's not what I signed up for. There was a comic that you've probably seen, and it has someone looking bleary-eyed, looking at a computer screen.
Yes.
And, right?
Yes.
And he said, I can't go to bed because someone disagrees with me on social media.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Somebody's wrong on the internet.
Something's right, exactly. Yeah. And so you can't somehow let it go. You do need to let it go, because you have to be reminded not only of how you want to use your energy, but how to be your better self in that moment, and not let someone kind of get sort of that base part of your personality out of you just for the sake of fighting. Some people feed off of it, and they will have endless reserves for it, because it's part of what gives them almost like the oxygen that they breathe. And for other people, it's very draining. And yes. So you want to know yourself and know if it's healthy and if it's worth it. And also, are you just feeding someone else's ego? And are you giving them more material to use against you? Because you know, if they're closed-minded to what you're saying, whatever you say to them is going to be turned around, is going to be used as proof of your stupidity or whatever. Like, don't keep giving the material. Just end it there.
Those are all really good points. I hadn't even thought about half of those. Those are all really good. I was thinking about the futility of the activity in the first place. This is something I have definitely come to learn the hard way. As I just mentioned, I've made every mistake you can make, and I have made them repeatedly, thinking, you know, in the crazy insaneness of my mind, that, you know, if I keep doing the same thing over and over again, maybe I'll get a different result. And finally, after about 3 or 4 times, or 5 or 6 or 7, I finally, you know, oh, this really isn't working. And I really need to stop what I'm doing. Somehow my approach is wrong, or somehow and I thought that for a long time. I really thought about my approach. I thought about how I talked with people. This is all fully applicable in person or in social media. You know, how you present an argument, how you present your case, or whatever your position or opinion or idea is. You know, and then you're suddenly in this confrontational sort of situation where you and somebody else are having at it. And I've kind of come to a place now where I think to myself, well, once I've said what my position is, and I've explained why that's my position, if the person's willing to hear that, that's it. I'm done. Like, I really, that's the totality of my communication to this person. Unless they're asking me questions about it, in which I can clarify things, if my statement of my position didn't change his mind or didn't get him thinking about it, and all he wants to do is keep arguing his position,
yeah,
I should be done at that point. No hard feelings, no nothing, just cool, man, we're not seeing eye to eye. And if I'm not interested in finding out what his thing is, right. I'm only trying to, change his mind or something, which happens, right? I'm not down with hearing your side of things. Might be part of the problem right there. Right?
That would be ridiculous.
Exactly. There might be something right there, but we're just gonna move on past that as though I didn't actually say that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But once that's done, that's it. There really isn't any reason to do all of this nasty back and forth, and certainly no reason to get into all the name calling and everything that goes on.
No.
More so in the social media realm, because I think what we're really talking about there is where we're really just having the facts are incidental. They're rocks, and we're just chucking them at each other. It's not like you're gonna, in a rock fight, you don't grab a rock and go, oh well, let's look at let's look at something about this and see, or see if there's some message on here. They're just weapons. Just the facts become weaponized rather than useful.
I like that. That's a really good phrase. Yes, they do become weaponized, and it's true. Yeah, if you have a rock being thrown at your head, you don't stop and you say, actually, I really appreciate this opportunity for me to be opening my eyes to this new way of looking at it, right? You're like, stop throwing rocks on my head. Right.
Yes. But okay, but let's get back to the doubling down. I realized we went a little over, and I want to kind of bring it back to the doubling down thing, because there's this point where I think this is, I feel that the doubling down is kind of an important part of where we might recognize where we've gone to a place where we really need to stop the conversation at that point, because we're not gonna get the change we're looking for in this person, and they're certainly not willing to change, like you said at the very beginning of this whole thing.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know though. What do you think? I mean, that's sort of what I'm thinking, but I'm open to, is there some other place where there might be other phases, so to speak, of the conversation that you might start getting the red alert?
Well, I think if somebody also is not willing at the very beginning to change their tone, like if you give someone an opportunity and you say, actually, I would be interested in hearing your point of view on this. If you're able to not call me stupid while you're talking to me, and you use a really respectful tone, and I'll also respond that way, then we can have a dialogue. And you're kind of inviting the person to raise the bar, and you're saying, I'm interested in what you have to say. And then I think you'll be able to tell earlier on if that person is actually interested in having a dialogue, or if they just need to be right. Or if they need to sort of get out some of their anger. And usually it's misplaced anger and the need to feel powerful and in control. And so it's about a lot of other things. But I think early on, if you are able to say something where you're inviting someone to change the tone and lower kind of the temperature, and have it be that it's just a conversation without any personal attacks. And no one, again, has to be sort of right or wrong at the very beginning, but just let's share some ideas. People who are reasonable will actually like the invitation. They're not used to probably interacting that way. They're used to being insulting and then being insulted back. But some people will say, oh, actually, yeah, let's do it. And others will attack you for that. Are you trying to get out of it? Or what? Then okay, bye-bye, right?
Right.
So I think as soon as you get that kind of, again, what could be potential bait, see if you can change the tone, invite the person to change the tone, raise the bar a little, and see if they're willing. And then if not, from the beginning, then you call it a day. What I think you can also say to people is, it seems that it's not the right time. It seems like neither of us, and you can kind of, speak for yourself too, and that helps people be open to your message when you use we language as opposed to you.
Right. Inclusive language, yeah.
Right. We might not be at a place where we can actually have a discourse about this. So maybe let's try to pick this up at another time. And then if the person says, okay, fair enough, then you know it's a possibility. If the person says, well, you're trying to weasel out of
yeah, right, exactly. Oh, now you're just trying to slither out of it.
Exactly. Because I mean, exactly. So I tell people, right, if they're faced with a situation, if they try to set a boundary, if they set their standard, if they share what their wishes are early on, and then they'll be able to get a more accurate gauge earlier on before they've wasted hundreds of hours, if that's possible with this person. So yeah, as soon as you get that kind of message, or how could you be so stupid to believe blah, blah, blah. I actually do respect your feelings about blah, 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 and I would like to talk to you, but not in this manner. Can we talk in a different way about this? But I do think that there's an inherent issue with the social media piece and doubling down, because I think because you're not face to face, you don't have to deal with really taking responsibility for the impact that you've had on someone. You don't know that you've just made them cry. You don't know, and you might not care, because you actually don't have to at any point face them. I think about kids, even at school, where one might hurt another, and then the teacher brings one over to the other, and the other one sheepishly shuffles their feet and says, I'm sorry, but they have to, right. They have to do it face to face.
Yes.
But it's a really important moment. You have to face the person who you harmed, who you hurt, and then have that other person respond. But look in their eyes, see the impact that you made. There is none of that on social media. And
that's
so
very true. It's a huge situation of no consequences.
No consequences, no accountability, no. I'm thinking about years ago, there was a singer, she was a teenager, Rebecca Black. She had this song Friday.
Yes, I remember that, yes.
Right? And it was panned by everyone. I mean, it's not, opera. Okay, I'll just say that. Okay.
Well, it was exactly what it was supposed to be. It was a teenage girl singing a goofy teenage song.
Yeah.
So what?
Exactly. But because she was so harassed by millions of people, and because it was just sort of at the sort of burgeoning stage of social media, where people were like, oh my God, I don't even have to worry about saying something to her face. She's never going to see me. So I can not only say, I hate your song, but I can say, I think you're ugly. And I can not only say, I think you're ugly, but I can say, I hope you die. Because that's just funny and fun. And she then, I read this article, she didn't leave her home for years because people started threatening her life because they could. They had no intention of following through, but she didn't know. And so there was this kind of what they call either social bashing or cyber mobbing that is also part of that mob mentality. What can I get away with? But also, how many people can I get to jump on my bandwagon? How many likes can I get from my really mean statement, right? Because that's a whole other piece of the doubling down. Sometimes you do it because you really care about being right, or you know that if you say the snarkiest thing that day, you're going to get all these people who are going to respond to it, and then you're going to love that you got 1,000 likes, and you hope the next day you get 2,000, right? Because it's like taking a drug. So each time, sort of, your self-worth is sort of tied in with the comments that you make, the comments that you get, how many likes you get, or even how many angry faces you get, or whatever. You get a reaction out of people, you get a rise out of people. And then you want it to be more the next day. What do you need to do to get more the next day? And so it's not even a dialogue anymore sometimes that they're having with you, even though it seems like the argument is with you. They're having this dialogue with themselves. They want to see what they can prove about themselves, about how much more of a presence they are now on social media, you know?
Totally.
And to remember that it has like nothing to do with you a lot of the time. Really important.
Well, and also not only are they doing this, the doubling down or okay, we're going to keep going, even though, I don't really have any rational reason to, because they're playing to their audience that you mentioned, the likes and the dislikes and all that. It's like they have an audience, or maybe they do, maybe they don't, but they think they do. And so therefore they're.
Yeah. I mean, there's this whole thing about valuing the kind of social media metrics in some way that has to do with your self-esteem these days. And so,
because it has to do with reputation management, which is very, very, very core to our essence as human beings.
Yeah, exactly right. And so, I mean, I think that's why people will post pictures where, they're doing something extreme, or it has to be only when they look the best, or they went on that fancy vacation. They don't post pictures of themselves doing their laundry in their pajamas, like whatever. They might, but that whole FOMO, fear of missing out, doesn't come from someone posting pictures of doing their laundry. Like, we know that if we want people to think we have this fantastic life, then we're going to post certain pictures. But it's the same with, I think, doubling down, that people will support someone, I think, who is being really tough or is being really clever in their retort or in their meanness sometimes. So it is playing to different audiences. And again, it's bypassing you. It's just, again, this conversation they're having with themselves, with the audience, and then back to them. You just happen to be kind of in the way.
Right. And you really are missing all that context when you're on social media. So you really don't know any of this stuff. All these layers of things could be going on, and there's really no way for you to tell. I mean, there's sort of a way if you're talking to somebody who maybe has a lot of followers or something, you can sort of cognizant of that. But otherwise, you don't know who this person is. You don't even know if that's their real name. You don't know anything. You don't know if the photo of them is a stock photo, some model. You don't know anything about this person unless you've actually met them in real life and are dealing with them that way,
Yeah,
and
that's very true.
Something I thought about here is, there's people who I'm sure who are going to listen to this. I know as of I think it was about 3 weeks ago now, we have been off social media here in the Shelton household, and it has been quite something. I'm pretty used to it now. I don't miss it anymore. I don't feel a yearning for it. I've kind of gone through the addiction curve on it. The first week was rough, and the second week wasn't any joy either. But I say this not because I'm trying to pump myself up or something, or let everybody know that. I'm trying to say that I think that if somebody's listening to all the things we're talking about here and feeling, well, I can't do that. That's impossible. I can't, like social media is my life, or social media is so important. Oh my God. Like, you're the person who really needs to step back for a little while, because that FOMO, I hadn't even heard of that expression, but it completely makes sense to me. This fear of missing out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's where my head was at. And so I guess as a reformed social media user, I mean, it is, let's face it, it's addictive. It is, that FOMO thing is very real. That literally just put words to an entire concept that was running around in my head that I didn't have the words for exactly, but that is what it is. It's this constant, every hour, every few minutes, you have to check the Twitter feed, you have to check the Facebook feed, you have to see what's the latest Instagram posting and stuff. And that's horrible. It's horrible, because that is not life.
No, it's not life. And I think that also some people want to be the first one to respond to something, and so they miss right? Like, they have to get on that. And then also people are used to responding or having someone respond so quickly that then by the time you come back to a feed, people have already said, like, Chris, where are you on this? Like, how come you haven't shared it? Like, I'm trying to take a break. Let me take a break. Right.
Yeah. I've been telling people on my Q&A show every week, because I'm like, I finally had to go back and start looking at the comments. At first, I was going to be off all my comments on my YouTube channel. I was just going to post. But even that was impossible for me. I could not see some of the feedback because I needed to make sure that what I was posting was being positively received.
Oh, well, yeah, that is important, actually. That is important. I mean, the thing that's also really important to try to figure out is what to do when someone doubles down. Like we're saying, you know,
Right.
if they've gotten mean early on, see if you can change the tone. And if they're just not willing, then they're just not ready or they're just not able, and you call it a day.
Yep.
And you say, like, you know, I don't want to use my energy that way. And I don't want to have that person also have that power over me. Because that's what happens. They change the feeling that you're having. They change what's on your mind. They suck hours out of your day, you know, and for what? Also usually for not. And so then you just get mad at yourself that you wasted all this time and it felt like a futile effort. And so, you know, it's good to protect yourself from that. And also not embolden this person who just kind of, who likes to play that game.
Right, exactly, because those guys exist out there, the trolls.
Yeah, right. It's true. But I think also, yeah, for people to know that sometimes when people respond a certain way to you, it is sometimes because of how you broached it with them. So I'm sort of reversing it now, that if you're someone who happens to be particularly argumentative and you're someone who can dish it out and take it, then you think it's okay to say, like, what are you, an idiot? How come you could feel blah, blah, blah? And the other person can say, well, I think you're an idiot because, and that's fine. But a lot of people can dish it out but not take it. And so what are they setting themselves up for? They're setting themselves up for someone else digging their heels in, for someone being insulted by what they're saying. They're keeping themselves actually from being able to have a good dialogue and learn anything or even get their point across. So if you're someone who actually likes to have that kind of intensive argumentative style, know that that's not true for everyone. And know that sometimes you need to call it as it is. And you need to say, hey, I like to really jump in with both feet. That's my style. I don't get insulted. Kind of like it. Feels really good, satisfying. Like that's how I learn. And so I can, you know, give it to you, but also I can take it. And to let people know how you like to approach things and that you're fine with them responding in that way. But I think also being able to know that for the most part, that's not how it is with the general public. And so if you do care about your message, and it's not just about being right, but it's about maybe teaching something or helping to illuminate the public about something, you have to deliver it in a way that's palatable, that's respectful, that opens people up so that they don't double down even before you had a chance to be heard. So that's for the people who begin this process, who really do want to have a dialogue. They don't realize that they're kind of closing the minds of the people who are listening to them just because of the way they delivered what they said.
Exactly. I think that's very, very good point. In fact, it has everything to do with how I chose to present my information on my channel. Because I chose to do it in this very rational, calm, sort of here's the facts kind of way. And that was a calculated decision so that people would receive the information well without all the emotional baggage that tends to come along with horror stories like Scientology. I wanted people to get the facts straight into their brain, not just have an emotional serotonin, anxiety-filled rage fest watching one of my videos. I wanted them to walk away thinking. And I knew that if I appealed to emotion primarily, which some stories do, and I'm not trying to be critical of them, I'm just explaining why I'd made the decisions I made. It was because on a long-term basis, this actually has more staying power than the emotionally impactful stories. They flame out, they come and go. The impact loses its impact on repeated showings or tellings. Facts are always facts. And when people learn facts, they can use them and respond to them and do something with them. And that was the whole theory of this. And I couldn't agree with you more that the really the best possible way to present yourself in the public eye, personally, in person, or through social media is that way. You know, we don't all have to be Mr. Spock, but you know, bring the temperature down, like you said, chill out, you know. And that, I think, also will speak to long-term reputation management, which is so important for all of us, especially on social media too, because those won't be, you can look back a year or 2 or 3 later and not feel regretful about some of those posts you made that were so antagonistic and so awful.
Yeah.
Go, oh,
exactly.
Maybe I should delete this because this is, I just feel awful about this now. You know, Lord knows I've had my share of those, right? I'm not speaking from some mountaintop here. So I thought, you know,
it's true.
Yeah.
It's true. And I think in the heat of the moment, a lot of us regret what we've said. But the fact that it's then on social media, it's going to be there forever. And so, you know, a good kind of way of thinking about it is, if you reread your comments in a few days, will you have to reread them sort of with one eye closed? Like, I don't actually want to see what I wrote. I'm not proud of this moment, you know?
Right.
And it helps actually to take some time away and to cool down and to leave the scene for a little while. Shut off the computer, put your phone down, go eat something, you know, laugh about something, what change your internal kind of temperature, because then you can approach it in a very different way. And then what you can do is you can make a really important shift. You can then engage in a conversation or re-engage in a conversation where you're acting, not just reacting. Where you're stating a fact, you're not just saying, you know, how dare you? Because again, that's not why you were dialoguing to begin with. So you've let this whole thing get you off track. So I think, taking some time away to cool down is good, just in general, in person, on social media, and think, how do I want to present this and be my better self? So I don't feel shame thinking about how I behaved. And I also don't feel angry that I let someone get under my skin in that way and then cause me to behave in a way that I'm not happy with.
Yeah, good point there. I guess it's really a matter of asking ourselves whether we want to live a life surrounded by, you know, broken bridges, or are we, you know, building bridges, right? Are we,
I love it.
You know, I mean,
it's very true.
I had an idea about this digging your heels in thing, and sort of a you know, thinking about this for a while, and I kind of wanted to get your feedback on it. You know, we've been talking about doubling down and how it's and how, I mean, it gets pretty crazy sometimes. I mean, you can see somebody doing it and you're just like, dude, please stop, you know? But they just can't help themselves because of all these factors we've been talking about, plus layers more. I mean, there's so many, you know, so many vectors going in on a person and so many reasons why we operate the way we do. Many of which we don't even know about, by the way, like a lot of them. Anyway, I'm thinking that for me, and I can't believe it's just me, I'm sure there are other people out there who have been really trying to figure out and really working over and really, you know, like, how do I talk to people I don't agree with? How do I, you know, how do I deal with this, right? How do I change their minds? How do I rant at them? How do I whatever? And they just go and go and go, and they just come to a place now where I realize that it's a futile activity to engage in this cyber warfare, because we are all asking ourselves, you know, a couple years into this presidency, you know, many years into political turmoil and divisiveness across the United States. I mean, real rage, real palatable anger is out there on all kinds of issues. This is not issue specific. This is not a left-wing thing, right-wing thing. It's really all across the boards. And you got to look at this and think, well, who's doing this? How is this happening? And I think the answer is we're doing it, and we're the ones who are making it happen. It's not some foreign entity. It's not Russian hacking. It's not, I'm all down for figuring out where things are, bad actors and what they're up to. But I'm talking about this cultural divide that has been getting more and more divisive. And I'm feeling like this way that we have come to learn to interact with each other in a hostile way, it's actually making people double down in such a way that they're reinforcing and they're twice as certain in their position, which means they're half as likely, or 100% likely to never want to hear or be empathetic toward anything you have to say about anything because of those divides that we're creating, those bridges that we're burning.
Yeah, right.
Even with the very best of intentions, I've never enjoyed having a heated argument with somebody on the internet. I have never wanted to do that. It's never brought me joy. It has always brought me shame and regret. Yet I have been antagonized into it multiple times, and I have been in the wrong place, headspace wise, when I logged on sometimes, and I just had at it, right?
Yeah, right.
Always regretful of that. So I'm not one of these people who enjoys it, who wants to troll people, who feels satisfaction when I smack somebody else down. I'm not that guy.
Right.
I am the guy who would like to try to change hearts and minds because I feel my positions are correct like everybody else does. I'm making the situation worse for myself by doing this.
I have a lot of feedback about that. And I think one thing that I wanted to say is also this quote that I love, which is that the world is changed by your actions, not by your opinions. And so... Oh
my God, that's the best quote ever. Where did that come from?
I'll send it to you. I actually don't, I think, anyway, I have it on my Facebook page. I loved it.
Yeah.
I loved it. Because we can argue all day long, but what are we doing? How are we helping a cause that we care about? How are we furthering a goal? If we care about a particular political party that much that we're willing to, say goodbye to our entire family and friend group because of it, are we working for that political party? Are we helping further their goals? Are we raising money for it or whatever? Or are we just arguing and arguing and arguing? And what does that do? And so I think to know how to reorient your use of energy to something that really matters and that something that's really going to make a difference. I think that what's happened so much with social media too is that people talk the talk without walking the walk because there's just a lot of talk. And that's why I like a lot of people who will raise money for causes now on different, media platforms and stuff, which is very lovely. Because it's a nice way of shifting to walking the walk. But I think what happens is that with all of this arguing back and forth, we have been reducing ourselves into a juvenile state, right? We've left being adults in the world. And because we go into the, want to be, like this is how I hear it. And
yes,
so,
totally.
Right?
Yes.
And that's just not great for the world, right? And it also reduces very much in like a juvenile state to things being black and white. And I think being able to have a dialogue that is about both and as opposed to either or, where there's a gray, where there's I see your point. Yeah, even going back to Scientology. Yeah, it really, damaged me in all these ways. But I did learn how to, work a really long day. And I have a good work ethic, you can find stuff, right? Yeah. Even though you don't want to kind of give it credit, but someone might say, well, no, it wasn't all bad for me, and someone might have to see it as all bad, but why? That we, as we get older, one hopes, it doesn't always happen, but one hopes that we can see things with more complexity. We can see the gray, because most of the world and most ideas operate in the gray. When you are dealing with mathematical formulas or scientific formulas, no, that's much more black and white. But when you enter the world of ideas, then it doesn't have to be that someone's right and someone's wrong. It could be that, yeah, you're right about that. Oh, and you're actually right. And you have a point. And yeah, that was the opposite, but I haven't looked at it that way. And so then it goes into the gray. But there's some people who find that very dissatisfying because they still need to be right. And so they will then stay at the poles, the polar opposites, either being in the black or the white. But I do think that when you have just a little bit of time to send a little message or something, people sometimes go to the extreme also to be economical. Like, I just can make a one statement. So I'm not going to have a long statement about the complexity of my idea and how I'm integrating all these ideas. I'm just going to say, yeah, that sucks, because that's all I had time for. So it kind of reduces the argument sometimes into black and white when it's not really that way. So I do think that also with our political climate, it's very adolescent. I don't know how else to say it. I mean, it just is. And so how do we go back to being adults? And part of going back to being adults is not waiting for the other person to become an adult first.
Right. This tit for tat thing is so overstimulated on these platforms. And I have to say before I forget, you just made a point about how you cannot make long, nuanced statements. That is a very important point, because on Facebook, you can post some big, long thing. And there's even an expression now for this where people don't care. It's called TLDR, right? Too long, right. Didn't read.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care to read something that's that long.
Yeah.
Twitter, 280 characters. That's all you get. You can craft some amazing things in 280 characters, but for the most part, people just craft total nonsense, And
it's true. It's interesting because when I post my podcast on Twitter, I think, okay, how do I take out all these other points that, how do I get to, someone was raised in this group and then they were dealing with this and then this happened. And then I talk about the following things. And instead I just go, yeah, this person was raised in this. Listen,
Exactly.
That's it. That's all I had space for. Anyway, and so all of the nuanced and the kind of good bits, get sometimes taken out. But I do think that, again, if we're waiting for the other side to be mature so that we then will be mature, like, I'm going to wait for you to be a grown-up, so I'm a grown-up. Well, then that's not being a grown-up. Being a grown-up means you say, I'm going to behave the way I think I want to be proud of, no matter how you behave. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to wait. I hope that you can then respond in a way that feels more respectful because I'm treating you that way, but it shouldn't be based on your behavior. It's based on how I want to behave in the world. And so I do think that for a lot of social media, it has sort of fed the adolescent piece of us. And it's incumbent upon us to not let it, and to not let us atrophy and stay there. And feel permission to just be kind of petulant teenagers forever, because that just would be a headache.
Well, let me ask you a question here. Psychologically speaking, we have stages of development. There's various models that have been put together on this as far as, how people grow up in these various stages. Can people revert?
Oh, yeah. Well, I see it.
So this is a thing. This happens. Okay.
It's a thing. And it doesn't mean that it's permanent, but it just means that there's something kind of delicious about that stage of development that they want to be able to experience again. The digging their heels in, the doubling down, the being able to be insulting to someone, like on the, I think about people in high school, some who will let anyone eat with them at the lunch table, and others who will just say, yeah, no, not at this. You have to sit over there with your people, like that.
Right,
they just love that. It's so satisfying and mean and awful. And everyone will always remember that happened to them. So don't do that, anybody. But this gives people a chance to do that again and kind of have that part of them come out and not have to take responsibility. And so I think that if people are prone to feeling satisfied by using those kinds of behaviors, they will like the invitation that they get and the permission that they get and the lack of consequence that they get from social media. And others won't, because that's just not who they are, and they were never that way, and they don't want to go back there, and it doesn't matter how enticing it is, and they'll not get involved in the argument, or they'll do what you did, which is that you'll jump in and say, okay, someone wanted me to bite, I bit. Okay, I'm in. And then you say, actually, I don't like me when I'm doing that. And it doesn't get me anywhere. And that's a really important learning curve, because while you regressed, not on purpose, but it's a regressive stage, you then went back up, because you can move back and forth during different periods of development. And you said, okay, no, I actually want to be grown up again. That's who I am. And so I want to just feel like I get to be that way in the world again, no matter what, which is a wonderful thing to be able to see and to shift in that way.
Awesome. I agree. I have to say that this has been, getting off social media has been substantially more rewarding than I imagined it would be. And I guess in a way, another theme of my channel is I'll go mess up and then I'll tell you guys why not to make the same mistake I just made, right? Whether it's Scientology or social media or whatever.
I think that's great. I mean, it's very relatable. And you're saying, I'm one of you. I am, right? Yeah. I'm learning as I go. Everyone is learning as they go. And talking about bravery and courage, when you can say, yeah, the thing I did, no, don't do that. And here's why. And let me teach you about that. You have bravery and courage. You're admitting something, you're sharing something, you're being a human, you're saying, yeah, this could happen to people, and let me do some education and prevention. It's a really good thing. But yeah, there's some people who just can't admit that they're wrong and can't admit their mistakes, and that's when the arguments go nowhere. That's really not an argument anyway. Exactly. It's not an argument anyway. Mm-mm. It's just people pontificating, not communicating. I like it. Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly right. I love coming up with these little phrases. Oh, they're good. You have a lot of good t-shirt ideas. Yes. Yes. Yeah, that's a good one. A lot of t-shirt fodder there. I'd be wearing a t-shirt today, but it's so damn cold here in Denver. I'm having to warm up. Oh, wow. Oh, well, I hope that people out there who are listening to this will be brave enough to comment and give us your feedback on what you're hearing here. Like I said, I've sort of intended, I knew this was going to be an organic conversation. It was going to kind of go where it went. I didn't mean to focus this much on social media. However, obviously it's on my mind and it's easy to talk about these days because this is where we see so much of this phenomena and so many logical fallacies being demonstrated on a daily basis. It's really a great practice ground to go test your knowledge of logical fallacies. Mm-hmm. And that alone should say something about, and not just about the state of our education, guys, but actually about what we're doing these days. Because that's, we're out there doing that, And I think also just to say about, when you're face to face or when I'm like working with families or even people who are involved in cults, and their parents want to reach out to them, and there is a way. Well, there are a couple ways that help when you can kind of be cautious to not trigger the doubling down. And one of the ways is to not walk into the conversation feeling like and acting like you are right and you know more, and the other person doesn't get it, doesn't understand, doesn't see it the way they should. If the other person really feels like they are being safely invited to know something, and maybe even because they're worried about being judged, you need to offer them a chance to be knowing more than you. They know about their cult experience. They won't call it a cult necessarily if they're in it, but they can tell you about their experience. You're not an expert on their experience. You can be an expert on the cult, but you can have them come in really feeling like they can share something that you don't know, and they can teach you something. And same thing also with something that I've probably talked to you about in the past, where there's a way to kind of do a conversational dance where if you get in someone's face, like if you say, I don't like your boyfriend, I think that he's really bad for you, then typically that person you're talking to, especially if they're your child, will need to prove you wrong, right? Even if they already know that. They were about to break up with the person. They're not going to admit it in that moment. And suddenly they're going to hear themselves saying all these really positive things that they probably don't even agree with, but they want to prove you wrong because they don't want you to think that they don't know how to make decisions for themselves. It's a reflection on how they think you feel about them, not about the boyfriend. So instead, you don't get into their face, because then they'll have to take a step back, where they're going to have to protect themselves and double down. You then take a step back, so then they have the space to move forward, like in a dance. And you say, hey, how are things going with Doug? Whatever, totally neutral, oh, hey, that story you told me, that sounded like, yeah, he could be pretty funny or something. And then you invite them to be able to be honest with you, because you didn't come out with judgment. You didn't know more. You didn't tell them what to do. You didn't make them feel insulted. You didn't make them feel like you don't trust them and you don't trust their judgment. And then that's when you can hear them say, yeah, he can be funny sometimes, but sometimes I don't know. I don't know about the relationship, because they suddenly knew that it was safe to do that. So how do you approach a situation and not trigger the doubling down, and then say, see, I knew I couldn't talk to you about this, and I knew that it was going to be impossible, and I knew you were going to get defensive, and you don't realize you're the one who caused that. So be cautious, because it's circular.
Exactly. I was gonna end with this. I don't know that this is a catchphrase, but the idea. I think anything we do often enough or repeatedly, it becomes a habit. Mm-hmm. So maybe when it comes to some of these activities we've been talking about here today, are these habits you want? And are these habits that are going to regress you in your developmental phases, or are these going to move you forward? You can kind of look and assess your own situation. I don't want to get all self-helpy, but it's just kind of struck me that might be a thing. What are you developing healthy habits? It's a valid question.
Very true. Yeah. Because some of this is habitual also. Yeah. And that means taking a step away and looking at your behavior, making yourself aware. Exactly. And then realizing that you do have the power and control over it, and you can totally change it. Even if your base, your friends, your social media base is expecting something of you, don't care, because that's making them more important in terms of sort of deciding your behavior than you are in deciding your own behavior.
And thus, this is not a Scientology podcast this week.
No, it's not.
Because I know that's what, just to relate back to what you were just saying, that's exactly right. Because this is an important topic. I wanted to get this out there, but this has, this has as much to do with Scientology as it has to do with anything else, you know, out there.
Right, exactly. And I think about the sort of Scientology dialogue of what crimes are you guilty of? What crimes have you committed, right? Talk about doubling down, right?
Oh my God.
You know, that's
Yes.
the end of that possible discussion, right? So some groups are really good at that, unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
All right, Rachel, thank you very much for your time and attention on this and your contribution. I really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. I'm glad you're covering it. It affects a lot of people, a lot of people. So I hope a lot of people feel like they can kind of not only change their own way with it, but protect themselves better out there.
Exactly. Okay, folks, thanks for coming around and listening to all of this. And again, leave any questions, comments, or feedback, good, bad, or sideways, in the comment section below. I simply ask that if you have criticism about some of the things that we've been saying, please do explain yourself. Put the whole concept there. Put the whole thought there. And please make any criticism constructive, because that's actually helpful and useful. I don't say that because I'm trying to avoid bad comments. It's because I want good ones. So on that line, thanks for coming around, and I will see you guys next week. Bye-bye.